There is no useless experience, as read by the author. Lesson 14. Everybody teaches you something through their actions. Don't miss the lesson. 4 men, 4 stories. The first is the gentleman who gave me my first radio job. He was a talented musician who was blinded at the age of 3, but overcame his lack of sight to become one of the most respected musicians of our time. He also established a radio station in the early years of the new millennium and thrust me into the world of media by literally handing me, an inexperienced and completely unknown fellow, my first shot at presenting a radio show. It was a breakfast show, no less. One that I would go on to do with him for more than a year. Over the period that I worked with him, I not only became adept at presenting on radio, but I also had opportunity to become his personal assistant, giving me a rare insight into the life of a man who did not have the ability to see. What he lacked in sight, he made up for with great memory and insight. He had mastered the steps in and around his house and needed no help at all navigating around. He did not need any physical aid around his home and moved around freely without missing a step. It was as if he could see. He also recognized everyone he knew by their voices. At one point, he even came up with a challenge to drive a car from Nairobi to Mombasa while blind. It was never approved by the Ministry of Interior Affairs due to the security risks it raised, but we had a lot of fun practicing, and he drove while heeding to instructions perfectly. The radio station sadly tanked. Nevertheless, from him, I learnt a lot about overcoming disability and not judging anyone because of it. He has never let it impede him, and he has even thrown his hat in the ring to be the president of Kenya. Kigame is the very embodiment of the saying that disability is not inability. I salute you, Reuben Kigame. Shortly after I had come back unceremoniously from the US and was just lying about at home unsure of what to do, one of my dad's friends offered me a job in Nairobi. He was a successful surveyor who ran his own farm and had grown into one of the most sought after in his field. I have mentioned earlier how he employed me as his transport manager and gave me a room as a caretaker in one of his properties in an upmarket neighborhood, and even one of his vehicles to run his errands, and how I let him down. This gentleman was successful in every way and had a work ethic that was second to none. He demanded that we report to work at 6 a.m. every day, suited up, and didn't just demand it, he did it himself, like clockwork. He would be in his office every day from 6 a.m. and would spend his first hour reading with no disturbances. He kept his appointments faithfully and was always on time. Although he would sometimes break in the early afternoon, he never, ever wasted his mornings. His attention to detail was impressive, and his eye for neatness and a clean environment was impeccable, and even looked a bit over the top to his employees. However, it was an excellent lesson which I took to heart. Following his principles taught me the value of an early morning and timekeeping, and they have been instrumental in helping me have an extra edge on some tasks and opportunities that have come my way. That is one key thing I attribute to my time with Ken Kubasu. There is a gentleman that got me curious about him from our very first interaction. I knew of him as a top city lawyer, but had never interacted at a personal level with him. So, when my father sent me to his office to drop off something for our very first meeting, I was surprised, nay, shocked, that he stood up to welcome me to his office. I had no job, no title, and nothing valuable to my name or self, and yet this top honcho stood up and gestured to me to sit down before he did. It stuck with me, and after we became friends, I noticed he did it with everyone who visited him. High or low, rich or poor, he accorded them respect and made them feel like they were somebody, and I believe he got quite a lot of clients this way. He was also a stickler for order and believed in the 40th US President Ronald Reagan's principle of trust but verify, which usually led him to avert many questionable interactions. But that lesson on humility and making a good first impression stuck, and although I haven't perfected it, I find myself trying to apply it often when I meet new people. Thank you, Advocate Wilson Kalia. One of my dad's best friends was a pilot. I grew up knowing him as Uncle Ellie. In my early years, I remembered him loaning my father his cars several times to take us up country when we didn't have any. Growing up and having owned several cars myself, I realized this was a much bigger deal in the 80s, with fewer people who knew how to drive and even fewer who knew how to drive well. Yet he did it without a fuss, and this was a great show of trust. In fact, I learned how to drive with one of his cars, a station wagon Nissan Sunny KZL 818 as my practice car. One day, in the year 1995, when I was still in high school in Form 4, I developed a headache that became a splitting one within a few minutes. I vaguely recall requesting the class teacher to allow me to go rest in the dormitories, as I could barely see. That was the last thing I would remember before I woke up 4 days later in Nairobi Hospital. Apparently, I was diagnosed with cerebral malaria, and from the tales from my friends, I had suddenly become mad before being rushed to the local hospital at Kabarnet. By the time my parents were being informed that I had slipped into unconsciousness and was listed as critical, bordering on death. It was my father's friend who, upon hearing of this incident, all the way in Nairobi, made a decision to come for me with a plane at his own cost. That is how I ended up in Nairobi Hospital in record time. That decision saved my life. Much later, when our dad walked out on Mom after 38 years of marriage, and I was unable to get through to him, it was to Uncle Ellie that I sought solace from. I remember telling him the sordid tale of what had happened and the expression on his face as he absorbed the news I was giving him. He stared at the table for a long while before looking at me and telling me, if you were not the one telling me these things about my friend, I would never believe it. Even then, his brotherly love for his friend was still intact. There are many other ways he has helped our family too numerous to tabulate here, purely based on his friendship with my father. From him, I have learned the power of true friendship that gives without expectation, and as epitomized in the verse in Proverbs 18:24, there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I'm still striving to be that kind of friend in my associations and to emulate the man that he is. God bless you, Captain Ellie Alvale. Everyone teaches you something, even without words. Don't miss the lessons.